Hey, welcome back. It's the And Go podcast. Today, Brian suggested, in honor of him getting selected for a small publication, suggested that we
Very
talk
small.
about the horror genre. So, Brian, first, why don't you tell us a little bit about the selection?
The selection? Okay, it was for a short story that I've been writing called Deal Breakers. It's basically me playing with the idea of deal with the devil, but these deals with the devil or these contracts in the series, you don't lose your soul to them. Basically, if you contract these deal makers,
Mhm.
they want body parts. Basically, they contract body parts for demons to come to our world. And the main character is known as deal breakers. They're basically people who get tracked down contracts. It's way more complex than that. But I like to deal with the devil, and basically a brain someone who donates their brain becomes a zombie master. Someone who donates their heart becomes a vampire, pretty much. Basically, these demons want special people's body parts. Like an Olympic athlete
Sure.
would contract his muscles or maybe his heart if it's really good. That's the basic premise, and I play around with it and do some world building. And this story is my first one in a series that I actually plan on continuing.
That's fun, and that is an interesting idea. I like the deal with the devil aspect. You don't really get a whole lot of that. Ooh, that actually ties into a conversation, and I don't want to get too off topic here, but it ties into a conversation we were having offline. Has that been covered in anime? Deals with the devil?
Deals with the devil. I'm sure it has. There's something called, off the top of my head, the only thing I can think of is D. Gray Man, where basically people resurrect people and the resurrected people come back as demons. It's not
Huh.
explicitly the devil, but it's pretty close.
Okay. Interesting. Anyway, on to horror. I just thought I'd get a little background there.
Okay. Yeah. It's good to have. The more you know, the better. G.I. Joe!
Knowing is half the battle. Right?
So, horror wise, I want to focus on some of my favorite writers, like Joe Hill. He's just been getting shit after shit adapted. He has AMC has his crappy vampire weird thing, and Netflix has his Lock and Key series. He
I've been
also.
watching that actually.
What do you think of it so far?
Actually, it's pretty good.
Good
I'm a
reviews.
little surprised at it because it kind of bills itself when you first start watching it, almost as like a kid show or something you could watch with like family, and then it gets like super dark out of nowhere. You're like, oh geez, man, yeah.
Yeah, Joe Hill's a ass like that.
What's it about? I've never even heard of it.
Basically about basically a family moves to a oldest father's old estate who was killed by one of his students. So they end up moving to this weird old house that no one's lived in for several decades. And the youngest kid finds these keys, and they're pretty much magical. And there's some sort of demon thing trapped in the well that soon gets out and causes all sorts of havoc. That actress actually reminds me of Rosie Dawson. No, I got her name wrong.
Rosario Dawson?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
I know a lot of information, but it's often inaccurate.
I have a hard time figuring out if Rosario Dawson is hot or not.
Yeah, she's one of those weird places like, yeah, I can see her as hot, but I can also see myself taking a hard pass on that.
I
Depends on
wouldn't
the
say a
movie. I feel like.
hard pass. Yeah. Yeah, I mean she's fit. I just don't know. There's something kind of weird about her. All right, so no, Joe Hill. Who else you got?
Joe Hill, of course, the King, Stephen King.
Sure.
Okay. He has. Doctor Sleep came out with no freaking fanfare. It was supposedly touted as the sequel to The Shining, in a way, both the book and the movie. And frankly, horror's been dying, which is sort of ironic. The slashers of the 80s was cheesy, good, cheesy fun. And it's sort of been beaten into the ground in recent years. Like a lot of Stephen King stuff has been made into TV shows and things that have sort of ruined it. They've become dramas. I really blame The Walking Dead for turning horror into drama.
feel like it's dying because we see enough horror in our day-to-day lives now.
I thought this was supposed to be an escape from reality.
Yeah, into the world as we know it. But I feel fine. But I turn on the news and it's horrifying!
I feel like billing something as the sequel to The Shining is like you're just digging your own grave at that point because it's not going to be as good.
Yeah, it really flopped from what I heard. Not much marketing. Sonic probably did better than it. That was a fun case, and that was originally touted as a horror. The original design of Sonic, people were saying it was in a weird, uncanny valley.
Sure. Oh, the weird Sonic animation. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, them turning all these horrors into genres, I almost want slasher films back. Cheesy slasher films. They're still being done on an individual basis. Another good reason to bring up horror is there's actually quite a film community here in Baltimore. On my other channel, Creative Baltimore, I did a review of some local Baltimore artists, and they did one fabulous vampire zombie movie called Night of the Watchman. You guys should check it out. It's on Amazon Prime if you have that. I'm pretty sure
cool.
It's free on Amazon Prime.
Now, I've heard that for independent filmmakers, sound is one of the most difficult things to, it's hard to mic everyone up appropriately. How do you think they did with that?
Oh, sound design? That's really coming out of left field. I mean,
well, that's what I've heard. For independent filmmakers, it's really challenging to mic everything and have it, have everything come through clear.
Unfortunately, the sound mixing seems to be whispering dialogue runs into the equivalent of audio jump scares.
I was going to bring up Saw. I think they're making another Saw, which fits in with the whole slasher thing. It's kind of a slasher, straight up slasher movie.
It's the mind fuck slasher thing. Self-deprecation.
I mean, Saw 1 was fantastic.
Okay, yeah, I'll agree. Saw 2
Beyond that, they were
had
terrible
moments, but downhill from there.
Yeah, and it definitely held up that old trope of the Jigsaw killer he's dying of cancer, and then he'll continue to die of cancer for 6 movies and never actually die.
They basically wanted to turn him into a Jason or Freddy character, the embodiment of evil, even though he didn't start out that way.
What about It? Would you call It a slasher movie? The new It, not the original.
Haven't gotten around to the new It. Have you?
Yeah, me neither. I have not.
I think that if it's anything like the book, it's more psychological. It's not really a slasher per se from what I know about it. I've heard about the movies. There's really no equivalent to slasher. Jump scares are laughed at in the industry from what I know. Comedy is probably the best. The comedy or drama are the best applications of horror in today's environment.
Oh, like Shaun of the Dead and Dale and Tucker versus Evil and stuff like that.
Yep, a ton of comedy, a ton of drama. Horror isn't pure anymore. I mean, it's fine if you want to throw comedy and drama into it.
I was going to say, that's really the only ones I'll watch now is the comedy ones.
Oh, so that's a great segue. Bill's not a big fan of the horror genre, at least in terms of movies. So tell us about that, Bill, I guess.
I don't know. Just, to me, the most of 90% of them are just drivel. They've never, even when I was a little kid, they never really scared me. I just never saw the point to watching them. They all are just boring, and they're, to me, the lowest form of filmmaking in a lot of ways.
Oof!
Yeah, all your Friday the 13th and all that kind of stuff. I never had time for them. I was never understood what the appeal was.
Oh well, that's not totally.
There's a
true.
few classics out there that are in the horror film genre and things that, of course, were good films. But I think the bulk of what people consider horror is just garbage.
Well, you put Predator on one of your lists previously.
Yeah, well, that's what and I was going to say that earlier, too. It depends on whether or not you include, sci-fi stuff. Because the sci-fi, quote, sci-fi horror stuff is, to me, is all just about the action. you know. So and it has the sci-fi element, which makes it to me is it adds a different element that makes the movies watchable. But even there, you know, some of those like Alien's a pretty good movie, but it's really not much outside the action and the gore. You know,
There's Event Horizon. There's The Thing. You're right. A lot of sci-fi horror really dominated the 80s and early 90s, and it was quite good. Including,
if you include the sci-fi part of it, because a lot of people will separate that out and be like, no, that's not horror film, that's a sci-fi film. So that's, I think, it depends on whether or not you include that like subgenre in there. If you do, then okay, yeah, I do like that kind of like subsect in a lot of ways. A lot of movies that came out with that, but a lot of people that I've talked to in the past, they don't consider those really horror films. They consider them just sci-fi.
Sure, the purists.
like Jason in space. Wait for Jason vs. Freddy in space. That would be quite an epic movie. Played up for laughs, of course.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the genre overall myself, but I will say I do appreciate, even with your standard horror movies, with a lot of them, at least the older ones, the dedication to the practical special effects.
Yeah, like the Fly.
I can respect that.
I saw a video about The Fly recently. That was a creepy horror. Again,
I've never
sci-fi
seen it.
horror. Oh,
Yeah,
that's a classic. Jeff Goldblum actually almost was an actor in that film.
He's
you
a
know
good
how
actor.
he's in a weird little space for me where I almost believe him, but it just seems weird.
Sure, well, he's a very unique looking and acting guy just by nature, so it's hard to believe that this human being is real.
Okay. That's your excuse for his weird acting style.
Yes.
I mean, I wouldn't say he's bad. It's just a very weird portrayal of all the characters he picks. It's not very natural.
Yeah, I guess going back to the main topic at hand, I'm thinking about like the recent horror movies, like The Grudge, and that one where there was the computer was haunted with like that the friends on the IM chat were all
Unfriend
getting
it?
killed or whatever. Yeah, I guess, I don't know.
Unfriend It was just, oh god, that looked horrible, and I heard horrible things about it. There was also one about Chatterbait.
Really?
Yep, it was a horror thing. It was like a Chatterbait thing. I don't remember the title. I know a lot of people just went down on it. They're like,
Oh, they went down on it, did they?
I set him up, you knock him down.
But yeah, no, I the more I think about it, the more I agree. That's just like it sounds like someone was just kind of sitting around on Chatterbait like a perv, and they're like, oh, you know what? We should write a movie about this. Maybe it's a horror movie. Or like they were stoned and getting paranoid that their Chatterbait partner was going to come murder them or something. Let's make this a movie. Why not?
I
Just
blame the
lazy.
Japanese for the laziness of Hollywood. The Grudge. How many times have that? The Grudge. The Ring. How many times have Hollywood just like, oh, that's really good horror from Japan. Let's remake it here with better production and generally worse acting.
Both lame.
Yeah, I know. I mean, they were passable in some parts, but they just put you to sleep overall. Hollywood just copying other people. Not that Hollywood really knows how to make films, I think. I mean, they know how to make films. They just don't know how to make films. If you get what I'm saying.
Cleared that right up.
Like with the list that I assume comes before this podcast, the most overrated directors. Cabin in the Woods was actually probably Josh Whedon's, who's probably an overrated director.
Ooh, disagree.
Disagree?
Yeah, oof.
Disagree with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Name me one bad Joss Whedon directed.
I think he's just a simple, bog standard director.
He knows what he's really good at pacing. He knows what his audience wants to see, and he's very creative, I think. I mean, his personal troubles aside, I can't think of anything I've seen of his that I just thought was bad.
Okay.
I haven't seen Cabin in the Woods, but I've heard great things.
Cabin in the Woods was good. It was just very cliche. I mean, that was the feel the movie was going for. It was a weird, it was almost a spoof on the horror genre that took itself seriously.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Yeah.
It was a very interesting film, but there was no surprises, nothing special about it. The story was good, the directing was solid. It's overrated,
So
I think.
that brings up a good question. What makes a really good standout horror book or movie to you, as the resident expert?
I'm definitely not an expert, but
Well, between the three of us, you absolutely.
I think it's about not. Pacing is a weird thing to go with. You don't want to go with jump scares, but you want to go with basically the director's equivalent of a jump scare. Keep the pacing according to the mood. You never want to have a section. Like, personally, I think Evil Dead is probably one of the best horror movies when it comes to pacing. Horrible production value, but their pacing was good. The original Evil Dead.
Bill, I saw you nodding your head in agreement over there.
Yeah, again, that's to me is what has been one of the like comedy horror films, and I think that's what it is that it's not just about the pacing; it's about keeping the audience engaged through the build up, because there's usually some sort in horror films or some sort of build up to, you know, whether or not it's somebody getting killed or whatever, or defeating whatever the monster or whatever it is.
Sure.
And it's about keeping people engaged long enough to get there.
Okay, I will bring up a point. Joss Whedon, out of the famous directors, is probably the best person to do horror in Hollywood, because I don't think Hollywood should be doing horrors. They do them horribly, okay? You have like Romero, who basically struck out on his own and created one of the most sensational horror movies of all time with Night of the Living Dead. Hollywood remade it. They did a passable job with Dawn of the Dead, but their remake of Day of the Dead was just god awful.
Yeah, terrible.
City of the Dead with John Leguizamo.
Oh yeah, God.
The actors saved that film. That's the only thing that saved that film. The script was pretty bad, and that
cool
was
truck.
George Romero, but he's become a big name, and the acting saved that movie, in my personal opinion. Was it
Sorta.
good? You don't think it was saved by the acting?
I don't know.
The script
It was pretty bad.
The whole script. I'm not saying the acting was perfect, but it was very cheesy, and I found it enjoyable. I wouldn't call it good, but I found it enjoyable.
Hey, Smartly, I liked that whole kind of run of zombie movies. Dawn of the Dead, and then Day of the... I don't know if it was called Day of the Dead, and then City of the Living Dead, because Dawn of the Dead I thought was a pretty solid horror movie, and again, I'm not a huge fan, but I liked it. And then by the time you got to... Yeah, the remake with Ving Rhames and the guy from Modern Family.
Yeah, that one wasn't bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then by the time you got to City of the Dead, they kind of just embraced being an action movie with zombies as the, antagonists or whatever. I did not find that to be
City of the Dead?
a horror movie. Yeah.
That was a movie?
Yeah, with John
Okay.
Leguizamo.
Okay, I missed
Yeah.
that one. Okay, I did Survival of the Dead, Diary of the Dead. There's just too many deads to keep up with, I guess.
Yeah. I watched Zodiac for the first time last weekend while I was eating half a loaf of bread to the face.
So applicable to your story, the loaf of bread.
I thought it was relevant.
Okay.
I thought it was relevant.
Did you throw it up? Is that why it's relevant?
No, I did not throw it up.
Okay. Continue.
Thank God, because it was so good. Although then I could have eaten it twice if I puked it. Like a
Continue,
dog.
I said.
The first 20 minutes where the Zodiac is going around blowing people away made me very uncomfortable. I think that's the whole thing. I can think of many better ways to spend 2 hours than watching people get blown away, like in a horror suspenseful kind of way.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I can watch an action movie where people get obliterated all day long. I don't know. It just made me... And then a friend of mine also watched Zodiac a few days later because they knew I was watching it, and weren't fazed by it at all because they're a big fan of the horror genre in general. So I realize that I'm a big punk bitch when it comes to horror movies most of the time.
I just find it boring.
That brings up a weird space. with the horror movie genre, like Silence of the Lamb, is that horror? Are those movies the serial killers in the vein? Seven, horror or suspense, psychological
Suspense.
thriller?
Yeah, see, that's the thing. I think those are psychological thrillers. I think those are thrillers, not horror films.
Okay, they have horror elements.
Yeah, agreed on that.
Yeah.
But see, I do like a good suspense. Like the rest of Zodiac was kind of suspenseful, and I liked that. I like Alex and I say all the time, good art makes you feel feelings, and I do like feeling a little on edge.
Feelings rainbow pops up.
Was this the Jake Gyllenhaal one?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. It was really boring. The whole movie was boring.
yeah. It fell off. The last 30 minutes fell off quite a bit, but
And I'm not a fan of Jake Gyllenhaal, but so
I
that
like
probably
Jake
didn't help.
Gyllenhaal. Yeah.
So
I
Bill,
can't stand him.
you
Or
were
his sister.
you were saying
Yeah, I don't like Maggie.
So Bill, you were talking about horror. You like it in video game form. Tell us about that a bit.
I mean, Resident Evil. Need I say more? I mean,
There was also Parasite Eve.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Another
Parasite
favorite.
Eve, definitely. Especially the second one on PlayStation. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the thing is when you move the horror genre into video games, it's interactive, so it does keep you engaged, right? It's a constant state of suspense. Whereas to me, on watching it on a film is just boring. It doesn't scare me, which is I think I don't know, I could be wrong, but I feel like that's kind of the draw for a lot of people when they go to see a horror film is they want that adrenaline rush or to be scared or whatever.
Yeah.
And most horror films I just find laughable. And when you peel that away, the script writing is usually terrible. The acting's usually terrible. So all around the experience for me is just like, why am I even bothering to waste 2 hours on this? But with a video game, you can do a lot more with that particular mode of media to keep people engaged. Like Resident Evil, there's a constant zombie threat that you get to deal with in real time, and so I think it makes for really good video games. But yeah, I definitely love the Resident Evil series. For the most part, all of them. And like you said, Parasite Eve, Last of Us. There's a bunch of them.
I'm a big Dead Space fan, and I think you're absolutely
yeah.
right.
Dead Space was awesome.
It really was. Now, not so much the second one, but the first one I remember playing on Halloween 10 years ago, and it was so fucking good, man. And like you said, there's so many elements. Like, okay, my guy's at half health, and I don't have any med kits, and I'm low on ammo, and I got to make it down this corridor, and people are jumping out, and I'm really trying to make it, and they're chasing me, and can I close this door in time?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a good point.
So the investment is really what it's all about. You don't
Yeah,
want
the
to yell
interactivity.
at the people on the screen like in Scream.
And to be honest, when you look at them too, like usually if you were to, I mean, it's kind of apples to oranges, but if you were to line up like the effects, like the visual effects of horror films versus horror video games, I mean, it's night and day. You do a lot more to build an immersive world with a video game, I think, than the horror genre does in film.
Yeah, and I understand it's cheaper to make movies with, CGI special effects, but I think horror movies should start stepping away from that a little bit, because you're right. I mean, when it comes to, you can put video game effects in a horror movie, video games win in that scenario. But again, I do respect the time and effort people make into how do we make this head pop out of this thing and there's blood squirting everywhere and, stuff like that.
I think that the earlier seasons, The Walking Dead was worth watching. I mean,
Yeah,
to be
I agree with
honest.
Okay.
I thought that they had a fairly good, set of writers. I think that they were engaging and, moved the story along without getting too boring. Of course, later they started getting overly dramatic and a lot of the characters got way over the top and it kind of ruined it.
For sure.
But part of that was, I think they did a good job at kind of world building with their special effects. They spent a lot of time putting people in makeup for the zombies, and the way that they do the set building kind of all is immersive. It's there in the background. Where, again, I think a lot of films don't bother to do that.
Yeah, and I get what Brian was saying earlier about The Walking Dead specifically being more of a drama than a horror, but I feel like that's that's an element that I think a lot of horror movies are missing because, well, obviously it's a TV series, so you have a lot of time to build up these characters and, the audience starts picking out who their favorite character is for whatever reason, or oh, that guy reminds me of my grandpa or uncle or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they die, you know? And
Yeah.
it's you have that moment of tension where you're hoping that Dale or whatever can make it to the Winnebago in time, and then he doesn't, and he goes down, and then you feel something, you know? When it's just a
Instead
bunch
of
of
just-
teenagers.
2 hours, of teenagers doing stupid stuff and then getting cut up by a chainsaw. You're like,
Yeah, it's like, who
all
cares?
right. Yeah,
Who cares?
I've seen blood spatter like 15 times. Why
Yeah.
are we still watching this?
There's a certain catharticism to seeing Kevin Bacon in the original Friday the 13th getting speared with an arrow through a bed.
How dare you? We will not speak ill of Kevin Bacon while I'm here, okay?
Kevin
save that for your-
Bacon. He was in a horror movie, a really horrible one called The Invisible Man. I cannot imagine. I think
Oh,
they're trying
yeah.
to remake it, but
They
that
are,
was so
yeah.
bad. I mean, horror nowadays really is just imitating other things or straight up drama or comedy. I love the horror comedy sphere. I just recently watched Zombieland Double Tap.
Oh, is that good?
Not as good as the first one, but it had redeeming
just fun.
qualities.
Bill, thoughts on Double Tap?
I haven't seen the second one. I like
okay.
the first one.
Yeah, me too. I think it might be my second favorite Jesse Eisenberg movie.
Well, you didn't like your favorite isn't where he played Lex Luthor?
I didn't hate that as much. I liked Batman versus Superman.
Oh, okay.
For the
Talk-
record, I saw it on a plane, and then I watched it again like the next day. I thought it was good.
Talk about
I mean, the Martha part aside.
talk about directors who are overrated. Well, is that Zack Snyder, I think? Was
Yeah,
that
it's Zack
Zack
Snyder.
Snyder? He's actually
Yeah.
he did a lot of things. Watchmen, which
300.
got a really lot of shit. He also did Scott Pilgrim Saves the World.
Yeah.
Oh,
good movie.
sorry, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World.
Yes.
Sorry about that slip of the title name.
See, I don't think he's overrated, Zack Snyder.
No, I don't. But a lot of people would say he's overrated.
Specifically because of Batman versus Superman, I'm sure. And like you said, Watchmen. I know the fan base
Hated
didn't
it.
really care for it. Yeah. But, the fan base is never going to like whatever the movie is.
Yeah.
Like, ever. I mean, everyone that really enjoys Marvel now, I feel like very few of them were hardcore Marvel fans before the cinematic universe.
Talk about someone
Maybe I'm
who
wrong.
doesn't understand horror. Marvel, the comic book industry, does not seem to understand horror, in my opinion. But I have not
do you
seen
mean?
anything good from them. They use it as a gimmick, like the Marvel Zombie series, Marvel Zombies vs. Ash from Evil Dead. I did not like the Showtime Evil Dead reboot. Did
Oh,
anyone else
yeah.
catch that? They had Xena in it. It was cool, but overall, I'm just like, who are these two little whiny bitches? They had the little girl and like the illegal Mexican or something. It was sort of funny,
Yeah. I caught a couple episodes with Alex. I thought it was all right. I mean, I think I've seen Evil Dead 2 once back in the day, so I really don't have much familiarity with
what
the,
about Army of Dark? Oh, really? You're missing out. Evil Dead 2 once. Army of Darkness at all?
maybe.
That was more comedy. I mean, the
Yeah.
original Evil Dead was done straight, but that was hilarious because it was done straight. Then they're like, okay, they think it's campy. Let's just go with camp,
Sure.
and they made
that's the
that
thing,
into a
and that's-
franchise.
That's kind of the point I was trying to make with the modern Romero movies. By the time they got to City of the Dead or City of the Living Dead or whatever it was, they're like, oh, let's just make these action movies. And you got this truck, you got John Leguizamo with this cool holster,
Yeah, and horror has enough tropes nowadays. They're ripe for spoofing and comedy. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the people I was talking about, I know filmmakers in Baltimore, did a movie, I'm pretty sure it was called Final Girl, but the whole movie was sort of centered around the concept of a final girl, and they played with that concept. It actually
How
had
do you
a
mean final girl? Like she's taking her finals?
it's a trope. It's basically like there's the last
Oh, the
person
last girl alive.
alive,
I see.
and she lives till the end, but commonly she's killed after the movie's over. Like the sequels, you find out she moved or she got killed. I mean, they sort of did
Sure.
that with.
She got a career.
I
After
like
that,
Final-
So she's not available.
I like Final Destination. That was probably the most recent series. Was good up until about the third one. The third one really took a dip. 1 and 2 I liked.
A lot of the '90s horror movies I liked.
Yeah. Also
Bill,
another
I'm sorry, you were saying
comedy.
something?
No,
Oh, sorry.
Another comedy horror that, with the same person as Final Destination. Devon Saul, however you pronounce that name. Also,
Oh, Devon Sawa.
Devon Salva. I always fuck
Yeah.
that up. Idle Hand was Seth Green and the fat guy who becomes weird lazy zombies. That movie was
Yeah.
hilarious.
It was fun.
Plus Jessica Alba. How can you hate her in that era?
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, Idle Hands is good. I liked it.
So we got a lot
Yes,
about movies.
I Know What You Did Last Summer, Scream. I'm just thinking, again, 90s horror movies were legit.
Has any horror books really struck you in the writing field?
I don't read a lot, but I did read The Long Walk.
Because I forced you?
Well, no, you didn't force me. You suggested it.
Okay.
And I read a couple pages. I actually read it in like a day. And that, I don't know, it was barely horror. It was
It
more
was
suspense.
psychological, yeah. That was
Yeah,
suspense.
and again, that's a great example of they built up these characters. You got to understand them. You understand their motivation, and you felt something when they got their head blown off.
But I think there's a difference between building up your characters and dragging your characters out, like some of these series tend to do. Like The Walking Dead in the beginning, it was very natural, and you got a feel for them. But they started dragging their feet out, and the characters started to lose their characterization. They just became like Dale from Walking Dead, just became a badass. He lost most of his personality, probably the 4th or 5th season, in my opinion.
You said Daryl?
Daryl, yes.
Oh, okay, yeah.
What a hilarious...
For some reason, they always feel the need to try to make them more extreme, in their personalities. I'm not sure why they do that.
Yeah, bad writing. I think it's also, at least with The Walking Dead, they should have ended the show after, 4 seasons or whatever. Keep it tight.
Yeah.
I was really disappointed I saw The Mist on Netflix, so I'm like, oh, okay, the movie. No, they turned it into a TV show. Like Under the Dome, also Stephen King. Horrible. I tried to watch it. I didn't actually read the book. It was one of those concepts that I was interested in. I actually tried to write a story around the trapped under a dome scenario, but it's interesting mechanics, like the Gone series, which I don't know why I bring up because no one here probably heard of it, but that was interesting. Being trapped in a town by some mysterious force and having people turn on each other is both a dramatic and horrifying element that I find interesting. I think psychological horror is superior to just slasher horror.
I'd agree, yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I asked
Riddle
that
me
earlier
this.
question.
So, Brian, I feel like, and Bill, I feel like between the two of you guys, you've read the majority of Stephen King's works.
I've read a few, yeah.
Yeah, I got a couple under my belt.
What percentage of them do you think is really good?
Half.
Because he's written a lot of stuff.
Really good.
There's been-
Most of his writing, I would say above half, but I wouldn't say all of it's horror. So half of his work has been outside. As you said, Long Walk wasn't really horror. That was more suspense, drama, characterization.
Sure, yeah. Dark Tower, wasn't that him?
Dark Tower was a fantasy with horror elements in it. Green Mile.
Yeah, I don't know.
A lot of his successful, The Body, which was turned into Stand By Me, Shawshank Redemption. Most of his most
not horror,
successful stuff. And are you going to be talking about well, we'll find out.
I also liked Misery.
Okay, I did
Oh,
not.
sure, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I did.
Both
see
the
Misery.
book
I like that
and
one myself.
the film. I don't know if that's horror per se, but I did like.
Yeah,
both
as
the
I
film
said,
and the
that's
book.
psychological horror.
Yeah.
Carrie was really psychological horror until the very end when she goes batshit crazy and kills a bunch of people.
Has her period.
Yep. She's teased, mocked, bullied, and she just snaps. Now, I think the film could have been a little bit better, but I don't see how I could have improved it. That movie was really hard on purpose.
I almost brought up Mr. Brooks again, but I won't.
Because we've classified serial killers as not really horror.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
that one's hard to...
You could argue Silence of the Lambs was horror. But
Right, we never did answer that question.
Yeah.
we sort of did. We said not really.
Excuse me.
But
Yeah, definitely more suspense.
like in
I
7,
mean-
the check the box, Jack, check the box, or however that statement goes. What's in the box?
What's in the box? What's in the box?
Kevin Spacey was always a creeper. Why did people find it so weird to realize he's actually a creeper in real life? I never understood that. You watch any of his films, this dude's probably got some major flaw in his personality. I don't know what it is.
Everyone always forgets that Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt got head from Gwyneth Paltrow on film. Ah?
Huh?
Ah?
I didn't even know that.
Well, no, because they got her head in a box.
Oh, okay.
The
Ah?
bad pun.
Yeah. Well,
Sorry, I forgot that was Gwyneth Paltrow. Sorry, she was not memorable in that movie. That was Gwyneth Paltrow?
no, she was not. I'm pretty sure it was, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Not memorable at all. Not Kevin Bacon. Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman.
Well, what else?
Oh, there's plenty more to talk about, but wish you guys were more into books. You remember me raving about Christopher
Bill's a
Pike
reader.
in the
Bill's a
day.
pretty avid reader.
I was gonna say I read all the time. I just don't read a lot of horror stuff.
Yeah, I'm saying I know you read, but not horror. You're
Yeah,
more of an educated man. You like that higher literature that I scoff at. This is why one of my
Sci-fi novels.
yeah, I agree. I read. You probably got me beat in sci-fi novels just by a little bit. My bread
Dostoevsky
and
is kind of terrifying.
What'd you
There you
say?
go, highbrow. Dostoevsky is kind of terrifying.
what the
Yeah,
metamorphosis?
Russia in general is.
Oh, the Japanese has. This is probably why Hollywood's stealing. The Japanese are really fucked up. Like there was a movie called.
yeah.
It's not considered a horror, but I don't know why not. It's called Ichi the Killer. About this little geeky guy who just goes on a massacre. It's one of the most brutal Japanese films. They also have several other, like Audition is a famous, one of those famous torture porn sort of series. Like Hostile. What do you think of this torture porn that was popular for a while?
Terrible.
Yeah, not a fan. Again, I can think of I can take a nap for 2 hours instead of
Yeah,
watching that
like-
shit.
Hostel and Hills Have Eyes and all that junk.
Yep.
But you know
Yeah.
that plays into this sort of 50 Shades of Grey sort of mentality. Wanted to be brutalized, fantasized.
Yeah, no thanks.
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
good.
that might be going
Yeah.
too far. I don't want to knock on 50 Shades of Grey. I never read the book, never seen the movie, but there's some... I never understood the torture porn either. Hostile, there's several horror movies. Like
Yeah, I mean, even Saw devolved into that.
Yeah, it
I
did.
feel like it did, yeah, after the first one.
There's also the really brutal ones. I don't think it was Chainsaw Massacre, although it was very similar
Texas
to
Chainsaw
that.
Massacre was brutal.
It's
yeah.
sort of, it started to become like From Hell. Also, I think there's several just brutal movies
Oh
where
yeah,
they
From
just
Hell,
are
the
mass.
Jack the Ripper.
Yeah,
Yeah.
some brutal movies out there that I can't even defend. I don't know how they're genre, but
So for you, the real good stuff is the books, the horror books.
yeah, they mix the suspense. They don't really, since you don't have the graphics, they can't rely on that. They need the characters. You need
Yeah.
to know. I mean,
So what have been your like favorite horror books then?
that is
We'll say the last 10 years.
Or author even. You have favorite
Well,
author or authors?
you guys should know Christopher Pike was my bread
Christopher
and
Pike,
butter.
yeah. So
I
I
mean,
figured.
he was a Joe Hill was really good. I talked about him earlier. His heart-shaped
Yeah.
box was really impactful. That was about a ghost haunting, basically Gene Simmons knockoff. Basically, an aged rock star with a young girl gets haunted by some hypnotist host. He also had the Fireman, which was like a world-ending fire weird disease. Basically, people just started got a disease where they got like boils, which would just like spontaneously combust the people who got it. The world was like in total chaos, and it was almost more like a zombie thing. You got the disease, and people would try to kill you.
Were they ninja zombies? Were they golfing ninja zombies?
It wasn't zombies. It was just very similar. Richard Mathewson has probably the most famous. Didn't read the book, but I Am Legend was actually a pretty good movie.
Yeah, yeah.
I watched
I
both
liked it.
versions of I Am Legend. Basically, almost that's where the zombies came from. Old depictions of vampires, and I find that interesting.
I could see that.
I mean,
You've been playing The Hunt recently, which I got an early access back in the day, and they just released the full version. I know that we already talked about horror video games, but I meant to mention it, so I'm mentioning it now. Pretty good. It's like a first-person shooter where you and your teammate have to go find a bunch of bounties, and there are other teams trying to do the same thing. I don't know. A lot of good jump scares. The sound design is fantastic, and you have the added element of not getting your head blown off by another team, so that's all. All I wanted to say.
well, there's the Call of Duty old zombie franchise. That's fairly
not
popular.
scary. Not scary, but the first one was fun.
Yeah, it's zombies have
Got a
become a
little gimmicky.
gimmick. Yes.
Yeah.
And I actually, in my second deal breaker story, I sort of play with that concept. Basically, I have zombies rising up. It's an intern at a hospital. She's walking down the hall. She opens a door. She finds a man like ripping the throat out of someone else. She runs
Jesus.
into the mortuary, and basically she locks herself in there, and the corpses start moving.
Dun dun
And
dun.
then the zombies get up, and she freaks out again. She comes out, and the brain donor, who's a zombie master, was raising them. She's one of the heroes of the series, and she's like, "Oh, they're okay." I do that sort of as a. I like adding comedy, even in a hardcore horror element. You need to have someone to release some of the. If you need a break, somewhat, you need some comedy. You need a comedic character or just comedic circumstances to break the tension, so you can fuck it up. I think that is why comedy works so well in horror scenarios.
Yeah, it's unexpected.
They're absurd. People in absurd situations.
I can see that.
I think we should go. I think we exhausted the book route. I mean, I could go on and on. Well, actually, I probably couldn't. But I think we haven't covered the video game angle quite well enough. Like, what about recently I got a Bioshock for free on PlayStation Network? Is that considered a horror? I think it is, at least the first one.
Yeah, the first one definitely had elements, I'd say.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that.
I mean, it felt like a horror game playing it, so yeah.
Yeah,
Very suspenseful.
replaying it, I'm like, okay, where are these motherfuckers going to come from? Because even on the medium difficulty, they can just knock your health out. Thank God for having a whole bunch of health packs.
Oh, one of my favorite horror games, Alan Wake.
Oh,
Big fan.
I liked the game, but the gameplay was weak in that.
I liked it. I thought it was fun.
Well, Alone in the Dark, I think. There was one game, I think it was Alone in the Dark, the original one for PlayStation or PlayStation 2, can't remember, where you had the flashlights and you could only expose them, was a better gameplay usage of that mechanic. I like
Doom 3 did a lot of really good things with lighting as well. Close quarters, dim lighting,
atmosphere.
Yeah, yeah. You only, you had batteries for your flashlight, which so you had to, use your illumination
That
sparingly.
reminds me, I tried to play Outlast 2. Such a snooze fest.
I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, I don't know what that is either.
It's one of those hide-in games. Outlast was toted. It's a PC game originally, and it got good reviews. But the sequel, everyone agreed, it was a little bit too weird and out there.
Were you a Silent Hill fan at all? Speaking of horror genre.
Uh, that one actually, again, I'm kind of a punk. I was the first one I was exposed to was Silent Hill 2, and it kind of, I think me and Alex were playing when we were kids, and I think there's a scene where you have to like read this poem that's on a bathroom stall, and it kind of fucked with me. So that was the end of that.
It's just
Yeah.
boring to me. I could never get into them.
Yeah, I sort of had the fanboy Resident Evil thing going. Silent Hills, the poor man's Resident
Oh,
Evil.
sure.
I
I felt
guess.
as though it was a competition.
But one of my favorite commentators on the internet, Ben Yahtzee Croshaw, basically praises
Shout
that
out.
movie to no end.
Wait, the movie or the game?
The
yeah, I
game.
was gonna say.
No one
Oh, the
likes the
game.
movie. He's
Yeah.
like Silent Hill. If it was a fat, aged, bald male, I would still have sex with it. And I'm not even gay. That's basically his diehard love for that game. Well, Silent Hill 2, I think, is his pinnacle of put on the pedestal games for atmosphere and design. But
Sounds like he has daddy issues, and that was the easiest way for him to
possibly.
voice it.
He's also pretentious, foul-mouthed, Aussie, so
Oh,
who
fun.
knows what sort of taste he has.
There aren't many I think maybe that's why I enjoy Hunt so much. It's kind of unique, and there aren't many multiplayer horror games. Oh, Inside was another one I wanted to mention, which is really good.
Oh, the atmospheric indie hit.
Yeah, really good. Best $20 or whatever I've ever spent.
And there's a really horrifying game. Papers, Please. Ah!
Ah, immigration is terrifying.
Communistic
really not a bad game, though.
regime. Wasn't that set in like Soviet Russia?
I can't remember. I don't. I've only played it a little bit, but I've watched Alex play it many times, and I can't remember the name of their fake country.
Reminded me of like Ukraine or Russia.
Yeah, it's supposed to be some Eastern European country for sure.
Well, let's talk about the elephant in the room. We've talked about movies. We've talked about
Yeah.
video games. What about
Yes.
the video game adaptions
Oh,
of horror movies?
they're all bad.
Left for
Yeah.
Dead.
Yeah. they're
I-
all
Pretty
bad.
flat. They're
Well, you know,
I think
there's
we-
a reason for that.
because it's a video game adaptation.
No, they're tax write-offs. Basically, people just want to get rid of money. It's like laundering. There's certain laws if they film certain places that they can make money off of these horrible,
Oh, sure.
depressing movies. I've heard. I think there was a whole documentary about these sort of video game horrors. They're tax write-offs.
Can you give me an example? So what video game movie? was
House of the
attached to that?
Dead. House of the
I
Dead.
don't even remember House of the Dead.
Oh, that was the worst
Yeah,
of the
me either.
worst.
I mean, that was a fucking awful game anyway. At least unless you had a full arcade cabinet.
Yeah, the arcade cabinet was good, but it still was beaten hands down by Time Crisis or
Area
Pretty much
51.
any other shooter. Pretty much beat House of the Dead was if there was nothing better as a shooter.
I mean, I think we talked about this on another podcast, but parts of the first Resident Evil movie I really enjoyed, honestly. Probably the whole first half.
Well, they tried to make that a good film, I think.
Yeah, the rest of them did feel like cash grabs. I never watched the Silent Hill movie.
Well, the second one I think was for fans because they actually introduced Jill, and that was pretty. Jill and Nemesis, they pretty much played around with the Resident Evil 3, which was the most popular. If I remember correctly, Resident Evil 3 was the most popular of the first three.
That's surprising. No Resident Evil 2? I would think Resident Evil 2 would have been the most popular.
I think 3 was more popular. I don't know why.
That's maybe springboarding off of 2.
Yeah, maybe it got the hype from too.
I feel bad. I know we knew this kind of going in, but I feel like Bill hasn't said much. But I know you're not a big fan anyway, so
I'm just not a big fan of the horror genre. So
yeah,
in general, like I said before, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
again, it just depends on what you drag into that umbrella or under that umbrella.
I agree.
Let's talk about
I agree.
sci-fi horror, since you do seem to be a fan of that.
Yeah,
I mean-
decent. A lot of it's decent.
I mean, what's some of your favorite ones out of those? I don't consider that a separate genre. I think sci-fi has the best horror elements because you're going into the unknown. Also, like with what I was saying with Bioshock, it was another world, underwater. Space, the final frontier. That has the best applications, and I think Event Horizon had one of the most compelling portal to hell, which I think the Doom movie, not the one with The Rock, pretty much. I mean, the whole Doom series is hilarious. The concept, they wanted energy, so they got it from hell.
See, I think the movie was separate from the games. I don't think they had the same concept.
Yeah, no, because that was because Doom the game is all based on Mars. The movie, if I recall correctly, yeah, no, that was not on Mars.
No, the movie was on Mars.
Was it?
It was, yeah. I'm pretty sure they like teleported up to research base on Mars, but the concept, I don't know if it was exactly about hell. It was they found some alien DNA thing where they had an extra pair of chromosomes, and they like came up with this injectable serum from it, and if you took it and you were a good person, it would make you basically superhuman, but if you took it and you were bad, then it would make you into like the gross monstery demon thing.
Oh, sure. Kind of brought out whatever your core personality was or whatever.
This is
Yeah,
so
so I think-
educational.
I think the like base like concept was different in the film, at least from what I could gather. I don't know.
Yeah, Dead Space also had a similar concept. They found an artifact in space, which was
Yeah.
just fucked with people entirely. I mean, the mysteries, like a classic, 2001: A Space Odyssey. Do you consider that one of the horrors?
I don't know. I mean, there's definitely like a suspense element, and I don't know if that's. See, that's the thing is you kind of have to like classify what's a horror film. Like if I was going to say, well, what's a sci-fi horror film? Aliens is probably the thing that pops to mind first.
Sure. I can see that.
I mean,
Top Dog.
As a kid, if I had to pick one movie that actually did scare me the most, that was probably it. Like as a small child, I remember seeing that, which I probably shouldn't have, but anyway, and it really freaked me out. You know?
Jurassic Park, probably a case to be made there. That
Yeah.
being horror.
Yeah.
Again, sci-fi. They use
Yeah.
concepts to create a very credible threat to people.
Yeah, that's a great point. You don't really think of Jurassic Park as being sci-fi because there's no space element, but it absolutely was
Yeah.
science fiction,
Definitely.
quite literally.
Yeah, they even had a really good science concept that I think in theory could work in reality.
No. Well, maybe. I don't know. I don't know enough
It would be
about
extremely hard. I would agree. It would be extremely hard. But it was very logical. It came
It's
across
at least plausible.
plausible,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I'm no,
Cloning is
DNA
still
engineer, but
cloning's still a very far off sci-fi field.
I mean, they were cloning that sheep when I was a kid. Dolly,
Yeah.
remember Dolly the sheep?
Yes, but the
do,
method they did it through, they still had to inject DNA into an embryo. They couldn't, to create a life form that doesn't exist, that would be, it's probably probable that in the next 100 years they could do that.
Yeah, I can see that. What do you call that? Eugenics? I think I wouldn't be surprised if they were pretty close to some sort of eugenic solution now.
Yeah, genetic engineer of human beings. That's
Yeah.
actually like, what about children of men? The human race dying off because we just can't have babies anymore. How does that fit into the horror sphere? You think that's a concept? Like, Children of the Men, you could argue, was horror. It was a
I feel like
dying
that's straight up
world.
sci-fi.
Yeah,
Personally.
I didn't find that to have any really horror elements, to be honest.
Well, I think you guys just have too literal of a mind. I think psychological horror. Why most people do not consider that horror? That's why I brought up Silence of the Lambs. Definitely psychological horror. Same with Zodiac and Into Hell, Jack the Ripper, which bordered
Yeah.
on that subject, that the genre I do not want to bring up again. I think that is something missing from a lot of horror that they're trying to put out nowadays. Not that Hollywood's trying. What big budget horror do we have? Now we're trying to push the superheroes since the MCU did so well, but I doubt they're going to be
I
able.
mean, they had Get Out was pretty popular. What, last year?
Yeah.
And it was
I,
written
di-
by
I
a
didn't
comedy
get to see
person.
it, but yeah.
It was written by a comedy guy.
Mm-hmm.
It was straight horror, but it had a lot of comedic aspects to the series.
Yeah, I didn't see it, but I
was-
know it was popular.
I would say
That's
eight,
alright.
eight or 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I mean, I really like Bradley Whitford in anything because of The West Wing. So there's that. And I do, like you said, the overall concept is, I like that it was kind of socially relevant without being preachy or too over the top, I thought.
I would have voted for Obama a third time if I could have.
Yeah. Good.
Such a
pull
cringy
for a quote.
line.
Yeah, it really was.
The liberal
And then
joke.
Little Rel, right, was his best friend or whatever, the security guard. It had some really the comedy,
the
like you
security
said.
guard was definitely
TSA
the
agent or
comedy
whatever?
relief. Yes.
Yeah. And I thought the ending, I don't know. The more I think about it, it really was not bad. The ending, especially, I thought was really well done.
Well, I think there was 2 different endings, a theatrical ending, and I think when it came to video and digital download, they switched the ending out. But that's
I
just
didn't
what
know
I
that.
heard. They had alternate endings. I know there was an alternate ending.
Interesting.
But yeah, that was probably the most successful, close to straight horror in recent years.
I mean, they're still making the Grudge movies, and I feel like that is,
It's another remake. Japanese
it's horror,
Grudge.
you know.
They had the Buffy Grudge, Sarah Michelle Gellar. Now they're putting out the new Grudge. I guess they think it's long enough that they can make it more relevant to the current generation. I don't know. Hollywood,
Yeah, I mean,
as
it's
I
different
said,
franchises.
just should leave horror to the indies. They're either going to make something so bad it might be good, or they might make a genuine scary movie. The movie I was talking about, Night of the Watchmen, straight up, it was a straight horror, but it was very funny.
Anyway, I feel like that covers it pretty well.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, we dilly-dallied here and there, but...
Well, that's half the fun of it.
Yep. It's a exploratory
That's why you guys are
process.
tuning in. Yeah.
Yeah, all 5 of you.
Appreciate you guys for listening.
Talk about a horror, right?
Yes. This podcast experiment. Let's start a podcast. When podcasts are just oversaturated. Dun dun dun. Scare us with
Anyway,
the
this
ending,
is-
Mike.
This has been Brian, Bill, and Mike talking about horror, the horror genre in general. Hope you've enjoyed your time with us today. Don't forget to tell us how we forgot your favorite contribution to the horror genre in the comments, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.